Hello and welcome back. In the last lesson, we talked about models, database tables, and migrations. If you followed along, we got to make a user model in our test blog app, and we were able to associate it with the articles model to create a one-to-many relationship. At the end of the last video, if you didn't save your work, go ahead and do a git commit at this time. So to do that, navigate to the command line and make sure you're in your blog app. We're going to do git status, and we see all of the files that we created and all the existing files that we updated. So we're going to go ahead and do git add -a and then git commit -m and enter a message. So we're going to go ahead and say add user and create one-to-many relationship with articles. Okay, now if we do git status, okay, good. All right, now we're gonna divert our attention to our main project, which is the My Recipes app. And we're going to create tables for chefs, which will be our equivalent for users and recipes. So let me pull up the diagram. There it is. So we see our chef model has two attributes, the chef name and email, and our recipe model has name, summary, description, and a foreign key of chef ID, which will point to the primary key of each chef in the chef's table. Okay, so let's go ahead and create these two tables. I'm going to start with the recipe table. Actually, since we're still in our blog app, let's navigate out of that. And then so if you remember, our project is workspace, so we navigate to cd workspace. Okay. All right. Let me see. Okay, we're good to go. Now, I'll clear this up a little bit also, because this is showing the blog app over here. I'll leave this on so we can follow along. Okay, so to create a table, we create a migration. So Rails generate migration, create underscore recipes. This will create a migration file for the recipes table. And then when we run the migration, by doing rake db migrate, it will go ahead and create the table. Okay, we run into this common error but when we use the Cloud9 environment. This is whenever we navigate between the different apps which are using different gem sets basically. So I'm gonna go ahead and type in bundle install. Okay, so let's try that again. Rails generate migration, create recipes. Okay, great. So this created a migration file. So under the DB folder, under migrate, there it is. You can see that it already created the row for creating a table, recipes. So now I'm going to pull up the ERD diagram again just to make sure. So we're going to have name, summary, and description. This foreign key we'll add later, but for now, name, summary, and description. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So name is going to be string. Then summary is going to be text. And then description is going to be, whoops, error, text again for description. Okay, and we also want timestamps. All right, so to create the table, we do rake db migrate. Okay, great. So that created the recipes table. Now I'm going to create a recipe model and check our connection to the table. So recipes table, if you remember, the model name would be recipe. Okay, so the file name for the model would be recipe.rb. It'll be in the app models. There'd be a recipe.rb file here, so let's go ahead and create that. And then the class name would be recipe singular, and the R would be uppercase. So let's go ahead and do that. Models, so right click here under models, and then new file, recipe.rb. And then here, go ahead and type in, so class, recipe, R with uppercase, subclass from active record : base, and okay, and that should be enough. Now let's test out our connection. So let me hop on to Rails console. Okay, so recipe.all. In a lot of local environments, at this point you can just type in recipe and that should work, but over here it doesn't. In a lot of environments they don't. So first I like to type in recipe.all. Okay, so you get this empty array-like structure. Now the connection's established, so now if I just type in, whoops, recipe, then hit enter, now you can see all of the fields. So you have the primary key, which is auto-generated by Rails. You have name, summary, type text, description, type text, created at, and updated at, which timestamps gave us. Okay, so that's good. All right. So that takes care of recipe. Now we're going to go ahead and create the chef table. So let me close out of recipe and the migration for recipe. And this is from our, these files are open from our blog app. So I'm going to go ahead and close these so we don't get confused. And again, this is from our blog app, so I'm going to close that. All right. And I'll open the README file for this app. All right, great. I'm going to type in some specs over here later on, so I'm going to leave this README file open. So to create the chefs table, we need to create a migration file. So Rails generate migration create _ chefs. All right. So we see the migration file here, create chefs. Let's go into that. Let's create chefs, create table, chefs. Now, again, I'll pull up the diagram just to make sure we have everything we need. So we need chef name and email. Okay, great. So t dot string and chef name, t dot email, t dot string, email, and t dot timestamps. All right, now we run rake db migrate. Great, so that created the chefs table. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a model for chefs under models. Right click, new file, chef.rb by convention. And then over here, class chef with a capital C, subclass from active record base. So that should be enough. Let's jump into Rails console. Okay, chef.all. Okay, now if I type in chef, okay, there we go. So we have our primary key, chef name, email, created at, updated at. Great. Now I want to talk a little bit about migrations and what's happening when you run the migrations. So we have these two tables that got created, and we created them by running rake db :migrate. Now, what if I type in rake db :migrate again and run this again? What will happen is nothing. No new tables are going to be created. Nothing's going to happen, and I'll tell you in a second why. See, nothing got created. That's because Rails actually checks for and stores all of the migrations that have run already. Okay? That's actually stored in the database. So when we create a new migration, it gets stored here, and when you run rake db migrate, Rails goes in and checks for if there is a new migration file that has not been run yet, and it only runs that. It does not rerun any of the prior migration files. Okay, that's why you have these timestamps, and that is why we create the migration files by using the generator. So we do Rails generate migration, but for everything else we don't use generators. We just basically hand code them. But this is the part, this timestamp which Rails keeps track of. This is why we use generators to create these. Okay. Okay, great. So we have our tables and we have our models, right? One thing I would like to add is that this class chef and the fact that it's going out there looking for a table with name chefs, lowercase c, and plural, now that's Rails convention. You can definitely make Rails you can make this model look for a different table, connect to a different table. But by convention, it does that. So we're going to stick to convention as much as we can in our course. And also, it's important to learn the conventions. Once you learn the conventions, you can then divert from them as you need. But for our course, we'll try to stick to conventions as much as possible. Okay, so next we'll build validations for our respective models so that we can ensure things like name, email, like chef name and email for our chef model are always present. And also for our recipes, the recipes table and recipe model, things like name, summary, and description are always present. Now, the first step to building those validations would be to spec them out. And we're going to spec them out over here in our README temporarily. But what will that help us do? That will help us add the validations in a very clear and concise way and ensure that we cover all of the items that we need to cover. We'll then build the validations using TDD, or test-driven development, to incorporate those validations into our models accurately. This will allow us also a very nice introduction into TDD and automated testing. So for testing, we're going to use Minitest, which is the default test suite that comes with the Rails stack. And before we move on to the next lesson, one last thing I'd want to do here, since we made some updates, is git status. So we see that we modified a file and we added all these files. So I'm going to go ahead and type in git add -a and then git commit -m and say create chef and create chefs and recipes table. Okay. And then hit enter. All right, we're all set. I'll see you in the next lesson.